The Gun Control Debate, Part 3, the Pros and Cons of Gun Control. Hello, this is John Hnatio reporting for the Objective News Network. In Part 1 of this series, we briefly discussed guns in America in their historical context using authentication and the Internet. In Part 2, we got a very brief overview of just some of the differing opinions that drive today's debate on the proper role of guns in American society. In Part 3, we are going to use authentication to look across the Internet to see what we can find on both sides of the issue. So against this background, let's turn back to authentication and type in the pros and cons of today's gun control debate. Authentication immediately identifies a data set from Britannica's procon.org. This article does a particularly good job of setting out many of the pros and cons involved in today's debate on gun control. It's definitely worth studying. On the pro side of the need for greater gun control, proponents argue that the Second Amendment does not represent the unlimited right to own guns, and that more gun control laws would reduce gun deaths. They also argue that things like high military-grade assault weapons, large capacity magazines, and other paraphernalia like bump stocks should be banned because they too often turn murder into mass murder. Proponents of stricter gun control laws point out that guns are rarely used in self-defense and that legally owned guns are frequently stolen and used by criminals to commit crime. They also argue that stricter gun control laws would reduce the societal costs associated with gun violence and that the majority of Americans already agree with them. High on the list of arguments for greater gun control is the need to protect women from domestic abusers and stalkers by restricting gun ownership. Other arguments for stricter gun control are that fewer guns would lead to fewer suicides. Enacting gun control laws such as mandatory safety features would reduce the number of accidental gun deaths. The presence of a gun makes a conflict more likely to become violent. That armed civilians are unlikely to stop crimes and are more likely to make dangerous situations, including mass shootings, even more deadly. The list in favor of increased gun control goes on. Proponents often remind us that countries with restrictive gun control laws have lower gun homicide and suicide rates than the United States, and that the Second Amendment was really intended to protect the right to form militias that made use of guns, not the right of individuals to possess them. Finally, the proponents of greater gun control contend that civilians, including hunters, should not own military-grade firearms or firearm accessories. The opponents of greater gun control, on the other hand, contend that the unfettered possession of firearms is based on the notion that every citizen has the right to protect his or her property and family as a basic right of survival and as a safeguard against the rise of a tyrannical central government. In this sense, the founders, in crafting the Second Amendment, may have perceived that the use of guns to survive in a hostile environment was already a given fact, and leveraged this situation to endorse the formation of citizen militias, not only to fight British oppression, but also deter their new central government from becoming a tyrannical force in the lives of the colonists by interfering with the rights of the individual states. Thus, the individualists on the con side of the gun control debate contend that the U.S. Second Amendment specifically protects individual gun ownership and that gun control laws do not deter crime. In fact, they say it is gun ownership by common citizens that deters both crime and the rise of tyrannical government most effectively. Other reasons why stricter gun controls are considered antithetical to the greater well-being of society include gun control laws infringe upon the right of self-defense and deny the people a sense of safety. Gun control laws, especially those that try to ban military-grade assault weapons, infringe upon the right to own guns and their use for hunting and sport. The individualists contend that gun control laws will not prevent criminals from obtaining guns or breaking laws, and will only result in leaving the common citizen unable to protect him or herself from criminals. The individualists also harken back to the lessons of history and the founders' distrust of large central government, saying that gun control laws give too much power to the central government and may result in the government imposing tyranny and a slide down the slippery slope of the government's taking away all guns from citizens. Gun control laws, such as background checks and microstamping, are perceived as an invasion of privacy. More gun control is considered unnecessary because, in the total scheme of things, relatively few people are killed by guns. The individualists also contend that gun control laws and lower gun ownership rates do nothing to prevent homicides. The opponents of greater gun control insist it is not more gun control that is needed, but rather education about guns and gun safety to prevent accidental gun deaths. Also on the list is the contention that gun control laws would prevent citizens from protecting themselves from foreign invaders, including terrorists. On the con side, opponents of stricter gun control point out that stricter gun control laws do not work in other countries like Mexico and will not work in the United States. Opponents of greater gun control contend that current gun control laws are frequently aimed at inner city, poor, black communities who are perceived as more dangerous than white gun owners, and thus the rights of gun owners across the board are being unfairly suppressed. The individualists interpret the Second Amendment as the founders' promise to protect gun ownership of all able-bodied men, so that they can participate in the militia and work individually to keep the peace and defend themselves and their country if needed. Finally, on the con side of the greater gun control debate, the individualists assert that gun control efforts have proven ineffective in the past and will do nothing to improve the current situation. There's another significant aspect of gun control that we haven't talked about, and that's the rising phenomena of ghost guns. So let's type into authentication the words ghost guns. Authentication immediately identifies a site that describes what ghost guns are. Quote, "Ghost guns are firearms that are privately assembled and untraceable. They can be assembled from build, buy, shoot kits, or from other parts, or they can be 3D printed." Close quote. Unlike other guns, these weapons don't have serial numbers. Perhaps the most significant aspect of the evolution of gun technology is that guns and military-grade weapons can now be 3D printed at home, making it very difficult to detect and raising the serious question, does the technological advent of ghost guns make efforts to regulate guns more difficult than ever before? Impossible? So now that we are familiar with some of the facts and issues in the gun control debate, What do you, as a responsible citizen, think should be done? If you're a member of Congress, what would you do to bring together both sides? We look forward to your comments on our ONN blog. It is what it is for September 10th, 2022. This is John Hnatio reporting for the Objective News Network. We hope to see you next time.